Here at the University of Kansas. And we've got a special treat tonight. We like to do what we call here is industry events, where we reach out to alumni working on the field of engineering broadly, doing some interesting things. And without fail, one of our most popular, most interesting events is to work with our colleagues at NASA. And tonight we have alumni, both working from NASA Houston and NASA Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena. So you're not here to hear from me, so we're going to talk to some students and take questions a bit later. So you might be thinking on those topics, but I'm going to introduce and then turn this over to one of my colleagues, Sarah Elizabeth McCandless, who works for NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab as a navigation engineer. She develops multi-mission software tools and performs operational as well as pre-launch orbit determination analyses. She's currently the orbit determination lead for Lunar Trailblazer and is actively supporting Europa Clipper and NEO Surveyor. She's supported a number of other flight projects, including Artemis 1, Mars 2020, and Psyche. She earned a BS in aerospace engineering and a minor at the University of Kansas. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Elizabeth.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I always enjoy these events and sharing what I do with students at KU, and then also interacting and getting your questions. So I think I have about 10 minutes. I will do my very best to keep it to 10 minutes. I can talk about what I do for much longer than that. So I'll go ahead and dive right in. We practiced this before, but let me make sure I pull up the correct presentation because I have about 100 things open on my desktop right now. Okay, great. So let's do this one. Okay, great. So as Dr. Wiles mentioned, I am out at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. So that's a NASA center here in Southern California. I am a navigation engineer, and we'll talk about what that means in just a second. But first, a lot of people, I guess, don't realize or appreciate how big and how expansive NASA is. Most people know about JSC, so Andrew will get to talk about that and all the cool things he gets to do with all the astronauts. That's probably more exciting than what I do. But, NASA, very broadly has centers all across the country. We have crewed spaceflight, we have robotic spaceflight, we have aeronautics, we have tons of different things. And JPL in particular, the Jet Propulsion Lab out here in Southern California, we don't work with the astronauts. We work more with the robotic side of space exploration. And so our very broad mission statement out here at JPL is to explore space in the pursuit of scientific discoveries that benefit humanity. Now, like most mission statements, that's very, very broad and maybe doesn't give a great idea of what that actually means on a day-to-day basis. And so you can see here, this slide is a little bit out of date. I think this goes up to 2019 and obviously it's 2024. But this is showing at a very high level the types of missions that JPL has done over its history. So we've sent spacecraft to every planet in our solar system. We have explored comets, we've explored asteroids, we've gone to dwarf planets. We have space telescopes that help us learn more about the universe, gravitational waves, exoplanets. Those are planets that aren't even in our solar system. We've studied the sun. So JPL really looks all over the place. And what you can also see on this chart, one of the things I always point out, a lot of people think about space exploration as going up into space and then looking out. So looking at other planets, looking off into our galaxy, off into the universe. But the planet that we study more than any other is our own. So we can go up into space and then we look down, we turn back and we look here at the Earth. As far as we know, Earth is the only planet that supports life. Whether or not that life is intelligent is up for debate. That's always my joke. And so we study the Earth a lot. This is a more up-to-date slide that's showing the missions we currently have in flight, in operation right now. And what you can see is that we're studying the Earth both with individual spacecraft. We have sent instruments up to the ISS. So these are I don't want to call them spacecraft, but they are objects or instruments that we've sent either to operate on their own or to have the astronauts operate on board the ISS. Other than the Earth, we probably have spent the most time studying Mars. So we have the most assets at Mars right now. I was a Martian for probably the first 7 years of my career at JPL and worked exclusively on Mars missions. I'm not actually working on a Mars mission at the moment. I'm working on other things. And one other fun thing to point out here are the Voyager missions. So these spacecraft were launched back in the 70s, in 1977, actually. So they've been in operation for more than 40 years now, and they have now traveled so far that they aren't even in our solar system anymore. They're actually in interstellar space. So I think that's really cool. And one of the things I love about JPL is that we do so many different things and we study so many different places that no matter what you're interested in, there's a mission at JPL that would be for you. So where is JPL? We're in Southern California, in the greater Los Angeles area. I'm from Kansas originally. I'll get to my background at the end. But when I first came out to JPL, I actually didn't realize that there were mountains in Los Angeles. Maybe that's silly to say, but I didn't know that. I knew that there were mountains in California, but I thought LA was the beach and the desert. So this was a very pleasant surprise to me. I love being outdoors. I love hiking, love camping. And so we're sort of nestled in the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains right here, which is fun. This is the building that I work in particular. And because this is a KU crowd, this is what my office looks like. So even before you know me, you know where I went to school, you know what sports teams I cheer for. I'm a huge sports person. So I'm not shy about advocating for KU and saying where I'm from and where I went to school. So if that's a really quick, and sorry, I know I'm probably talking really quickly, my apologies. I'm both excited and trying to keep this all contained to 10 minutes. So if that's a really quick, really high level overview of what JPL does. Now the middle part, I'm going to talk about what I do specifically at JPL, which is being a navigation engineer. So I do a lot of outreach, and normally I'm talking to kids who are much younger than this audience. So my apologies if this is a little simplistic and gimmicky, but the idea is that navigation engineers are an interplanetary Google Maps. If you're trying to get from the Earth to Europa, to Mars, to the sun, to an asteroid, to a comet, you can't just pull out your phone and say, hey, Google, how do I get to Jupiter? How do I get to the sun? We don't have GPS in deep space. And so instead you ask a navigation engineer, a mission design engineer to help you figure out how you can craft a trajectory to get to your destination. And then once you're operational, you have to make sure you don't get lost. So an analogy that I often use is if you're trying to get to the airport to make sure you can catch a flight to, go on spring break or see your family or go on vacation, you have to make sure that you arrive at the airport, not just at the airport, but at a specific gate by a specific time. And so you pull out your phone and you say, hey, Google, how do I get to the airport? And Google will, come up with a path to get you there. And it's probably a little bit easier in Kansas City than it is in Los Angeles, but especially in Los Angeles, just because Google tells me I have a path, I'm still looking at that path as I'm driving to the airport, because we all know that things can happen when you're on the road. There can be an accident. There can be heavier traffic. There can be a highway closure. They do that in Los Angeles much more frequently than I would like. They'll just close highways for what I think are no reason. I'm sure there's somewhere a reason. So you continually have to understand where you are on that path to your intended destination to make sure that you're going where you're supposed to go. Because if you're trying to land on Mars, you aren't just landing anywhere on Mars, right? Scientists spend years picking out a very specific landing site on Mars. And because the planet is rotating about its axis, just like the Earth does, you have to make sure that when you arrive at Mars, the place you are trying to land at on the surface is available to you. Really quickly, I'm just going to talk about one of the missions that I work on. I'm supporting 3 missions right now, but Europa Clipper is the biggest one, and it's the one that's launching the soonest, and is probably the most exciting. So I'd ask people to raise their hands. You can. Unfortunately, I can't see you. So if you've heard of Europa Clipper, excellent. If you haven't, after this presentation, you will have. So Europa Clipper is a really exciting spacecraft that we're sending out to a moon at Jupiter, called Europa. And Europa is a really interesting moon because it has this icy crust that's, covering the entire moon. And the moon is about 90% the size of our moon. So it's a decently large object. And so it has this icy crust, and then underneath there is a global liquid ocean. And so for life to exist, as we understand it, you need water, you need an energy source, and you need the right chemical building blocks. And so at Europa, we have water, we have an energy source, and we believe we have the right building blocks for life to exist. So if you think about the places in our solar system where life could exist, other, of course, than planet Earth, Europa is a really compelling place for scientists to explore. And so while Europa Clipper is not going to be looking directly for signs of life, it's going to be learning more about the habitability potential at Europa. So it's going to learn more about the ice sheet. How thick is the ice sheet? What is the ice sheet made of? What is the ocean made of? And when I say made of, obviously it's water, but what, chemical building blocks might be in the ocean at Europa? How deep is the ocean? Could the core of Europa look like? So that, again, is a really high level, really quick overview of what the science at Europa is, which is really exciting. Hopefully I'm conveying that to you. Of course, there's tons more information online if you want to go learn about it. But then my part, of course, as a navigation engineer is figuring out how do we get a spacecraft safely from the Earth, the millions and millions and millions of miles, all the way out to Europa. So this is the first part of that journey. So this is the launch and cruise trajectory. So we're launching this coming October. So coming up really soon. We're really excited about that. So we'll launch in October, and then this is actually what we call a mega trajectory. So it's a Mars-Earth gravity assist. I won't go into all the technical details right now, but we actually launch, we fly past Mars about 4 months after we launch in February of 2025. And then we continue on this trajectory here. Then we fly past the Earth in December of 2026. And then we continue all the way on out to Jupiter. And then we insert into our orbit at Jupiter, and that's in April of 2030. And then once we're in orbit at Jupiter, that's when we start what we call the tour phase. So we're actually not orbiting Europa. Jupiter has a really intense radiation environment. So Europa Clipper is technically flying what we call a multiple flyby mission. And so that's what this graphic is supposed to show. And again, I'm not going to get into all the details. I don't have time, but this is just to sort of demonstrate the path. So it basically flies all these different petals, and each one takes about 14 days. And so this is to keep the spacecraft safe. So the bulk of the time you're flying on these petals, you're actually outside the really intense radiation environment. And then you fly closer to Europa and you do a quick flyby. You get all the science information you can, then you come back out, and then you do that again over and over and over, about 50 times over the span of a little over 3 years. And so it's complicated and challenging, and that's why I have a job. And now, really quickly, for my background, so I mentioned I'm from Kansas City originally. My family, at least on my mom's side, are all big Jayhawks. My mom went, my uncles went, my aunts went, my cousins went, my grandparents went. I think I'm a fourth generation Jayhawk, I think. My parents, to their credit, though, were really good about not forcing me to go to KU. They said, no, you can look at other places, you can look at other schools. And I did. And I picked to come to KU anyway because I'm a big sports person. And obviously, I wanted a really solid academic education, which I knew I could get at the engineering school. I've loved space my whole life. This is a photo of the Pillars of Creation. That's kind of what got me interested in space. I'm not going to go into that right now because that's not the most important part. But I mentioned I came to KU. I got my BS in aerospace engineering. I got a minor in French. When I was at KU, I was involved in a number of different things. So I was involved in Theta Tau. That's an engineering fraternity. Have a number of good friends in Theta Tau. I was a member of the Self-Engineering Leadership Fellows program. So that had started the year before I came. So I was a member of the second class of Self Fellows. And that's a really unique fellowship program, especially at the undergraduate level, that's designed to help foster not just the technical know-how to be a good engineer, but sort of all of the non-technical pieces. So your leadership skills, your business skills, your management skills, your interpersonal, your communication, all those types of things. Your entrepreneurship, that was the sixth pillar, if you will. So I was involved in that. I was in Greek life. I was in a sorority, Alpha Delta Pi. I was involved in AIAA. So that's for the industry, a big professional organization for us. And we have a student chapter at KU, and I helped lead that for a couple of years. I was in the honors program. I studied abroad one semester. That was super fun. I've spoken French my whole life, and so I essentially took a semester off of engineering and went over to France and took classes like French culture and Italian, and it was a blast. And and art history and lots of other things. After I graduated from KU, I had an internship at Cessna. Now it's Textron Aviation, but at the time it was still Cessna, down in Wichita. So I was a flight test engineering intern. And then after I graduated from KU, I went down to the University of Texas at Austin, and that's where I got a master's in aerospace engineering. My thesis was about earth science, actually. So I was using different data types to help identify droughts in Texas. And I mentioned that just in case I know we're talking about like the collegiate level, so you may not even be thinking about graduate school yet. But I always tell people if they are thinking about graduate school, the research you do in graduate school does not have to define the work that you do professionally. So after I graduated with my master's, I came out to JPL. This is a photograph from, I think, like my 4th day of work. I was supporting a mission called MAVEN. So that's a spacecraft that's orbiting Mars and is studying the atmosphere at Mars. And so you can see I was new, so I didn't get a mission t-shirt. I have worked on a number of missions since then. This was from landing day when a spacecraft called InSight was landing on Mars to learn more about the deep interior of the planet. I've supported Mars 2020 for about 6 years. So this was on launch day. And of course, we launched in July of 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic. So we all got to wear masks. We landed in February of 2021, still in the pandemic. So we had different masks. I always tell people I'd love to go to Mars. As long as it's a round trip ticket, no place like home. That can be my other Kansas joke for today. And then I'll wrap up with this one. I know I'm already a little bit over. These are just some pictures of some other things I've done at JPL. But the thing I really want to highlight are these different missions that I've supported. So I won't list them all. You can read and I can answer questions if anyone has questions about any of these in particular. I just want to highlight that I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had at JPL, for the number of missions I've gotten to work on and the diversity of missions that I've gotten to work on. So these 3 here were Mars missions. This is Europa, going to a moon out of Jupiter. This is a lunar mission. This is going to Saturn. This was a planetary defense mission. I'll save Artemis for Andrew to talk about because I know he has more that he can say about that. Psyche is exploring an asteroid, and then Neo Surveyor is looking for potentially hazardous asteroids. So lots of different things. And JPL is great, NASA is great, and I'll stop there and let Andrew go.
Thanks so much, Sarah Elizabeth. The mission that I enjoyed learning about the most was last time I took a group of Self Fellows out with me to visit JPL. Sarah Elizabeth showed us around, which is an incredible day, and she walked us through the waning days of the Cassini mission, which was just amazing to me to look at that navigation project that it was. So we're going to have a panel a bit later, so definitely be storing up your questions. That's why these invaluable resources are here tonight. So before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew Hillen. Since earning his BS in 2004 at the University of Kansas, Andrew's worked to advance human space flight as a flight controller, instructor, and manager on International Space Station, Boeing CST-100 Starliner crew vehicle, and Artemis programs within the Flight Operations Directorate and now Health and Human Performance Directorates at NASA. Andrew has an extensive knowledge of spacecraft hardware and software systems, including their functions, operations, design, crew procedures, and mission rules used in ISS thermal, electrical systems, health and exercise systems, Russian systems, and mission control center ground systems and operations. Since 2016, Andrew shifted to managerial duties. Andrew's an avid mentor and recruiter of KU and future NASA engineers. With that, I will turn it over to Andrew Hillen.
Hi guys. I'm realizing my picture on there is a little bit dated, and I had a not so receded hairline, but I'm happy to be here. Happy to be with you guys. Brian, you're going to drive for me. Do you mind going full screen, or I don't want to break it if that's going to break anything, but or hit the.
Give me one quick second.
Well, so while he's doing that, I'll tell you guys. So thank you, Sarah Elizabeth, for your presentation. That was awesome. And one of the big differences of what she's doing to what we're doing, she's out at JPL, which is like interplanetary science. So they study Earth, they study other planets in the solar system, other components of our solar system. So I'm down here at Johnson Space Center, where we do a lot of different things, but the big thing is we do human space flight. So our missions focus primarily on International Space Station, the coming Artemis missions, where we'll send people back to the moon to return to the moon and do further exploration. We're gearing up for a Gateway program, which would be a follow-on space station, but this time around the moon. We're also enablers of the Commercial Crew Program and Commercial Low Earth Orbit Program. So really, NASA and the government is trying to provide some of that initial seed funding to get other companies to step up and find profitable ventures to create space stations in low Earth orbit for manufacturing or whatever other responsibilities. And then NASA would be customers of those, sending astronauts there and just be buying services versus trying to run the whole space station. That was my stalling technique. I'll jump into the presentation. So if you can go to the next slide, please. I did mine in a little bit the other order, but start out with what people think that I do at NASA, and particularly in MedOps. You know, top left, people think that I'm, my grandparents tend to think that I'm in a spacesuit walking on the moon. My friends tend to think that we have really awesome technology, like you might see in the movie Armageddon or whatever the current sci-fi movies are. My kids definitely think that I do something mixed between Star Trek and Star Wars. Bottom left, high-fiving astronauts. Well, I actually do get to do that, but maybe not every day, and they're usually not wearing an EVA suit or an EMU when they're doing that. I spend a whole lot of time in budgetary meetings and other meetings, as the bottom middle would convey. And the early part of my career and the people that I support are primarily working in mission control, supporting the real-time crew aboard the space station. Next slide, please. All right, so my presentation again, I'll start a little bit with my background before we get into the actual work that I do. I'm originally from Topeka. I graduated from Lawrence High School. I also lived in Wabaunsee. I lived in Cheyenne, Wyoming for a minute, and I've lived in Grantville, Kansas, which is kind of on Highway 24 between Lawrence and Topeka, and probably a few other places in there. I moved around a fair bit. I graduated from Lawrence High School, and right before my senior year of high school, my parents had moved back to Topeka. So then when I finished, I went to Washburn, and then wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. Went to Emporia State for a couple of years and started in education, and then wasn't really feeling that. And so went to business. And then by the end of my second year, I decided I wanted something a little bit different, more challenging, because I didn't want to be stuck in middle management as I got older. So I went to engineering, and the ultimate irony being there, now I'm a manager. So joke's on me, right? But I went to KU to go to the engineering program because I had an uncle who was an engineer for NASA. He had graduated from K-State many moons ago and moved to Huntsville, Alabama, and worked on the Saturn V program. And I always thought that was really cool, but when I was younger, that just felt like a different world and kind of unachievable. And then as I got older, I thought, I'm pretty good at this math stuff, and maybe I can be an engineer too. And then was fortunate enough to end up down Johnson Space Center. Next slide, please. I didn't finish with a degree from Washburn, a degree from Emporia State, and a degree from Kansas. I just eventually got to Kansas to get a degree in mechanical engineering. But I had a lot of fun along the way. I played trombone in the concert and marching bands. I was very active in Lawrence Habitat for Humanity. Had about 50 different jobs, a couple different pizza places. I worked at the Lawrence Paper Company out there that making cardboard boxes. Worked at the Jayhawk Bookstore, which no longer exists, but was at the top of the hill. And I did research for one of the professors in the civil engineering department, among some other jobs. Had a broken leg right before my last year at KU, and so that made school and paying for school interesting. But I eventually finished with a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Kansas, and promptly secured a job in a flight operations director or mission operations director at Johnson Space Center. Next slide, please. Oh, BS Mechanical Engineering. By the way, that ad astra per aspera, that is the state motto of Kansas, but it translates roughly to through difficulty to the stars, which some of the challenges that I faced in the winding road, I really felt has been an applicable mantra for myself, not just the state of Kansas. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, so on to Johnson Space Center. I hired on to be a flight controller managing the thermal systems of the International Space Station. So really awesome first career opportunity. And I moved down here with a plan to be in Houston for about 5 years. And by the way, here in August, I'll hit 20 years. So the time just flies when you're doing something that you really enjoy doing. Next slide, please. Okay, so I hired into to be a flight controller, and that history started in the Mercury and Gemini days when the Russians really ignited the space race by putting a Sputnik satellite about this big into space that went around the Earth, and all it did was go beep, 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 beep. But it scared the crap out of a lot of people, and the U.S. government jumped in full force with creating an independent space agency, eventually called NASA, and they made sure to make it separate from the military. The Mercury and Gemini programs were just figuring out how to get humans into space and get them in orbit a couple times around the Earth and figure out how to do the life support systems. And eventually it led to Apollo, which was to land a man on the moon before the end of the decade of the 1960s. And we accomplished that in July of 1969 and eventually landed a man on the moon 6 times and took a car 3 of the times. So hooray for our love of automobiles. After the Apollo program ended, there was Skylab, then some joint programs with the Russians, even though we were in the midst of the Cold War. And then eventually the Space Shuttle program, which was still going on when I showed up down here and was really quite exciting because they were the cargo vehicle for getting all the components of the space station into low Earth orbit. So I got to see JSC at what really felt like a peak of excitement and activity that was really, really awesome and a bit sad when the shuttle eventually retired in 2011 and a lot of the workforce contracted. But here we are 10, 12, 13 years down the road, and it's expanding again big time as we're on to Artemis program, Gateway program, which is the space station around the moon, HLS program, which will be the lander program facilitated by SpaceX as well as Blue Origin. There's a lot of commercial work that we're doing. We work with the companies that do private astronauts to the space station. So Axiom is one company down here, and there's some others that we're actively involved in negotiations with because they want to send private astronauts to the space station as well. So it's really booming and starting to take hold as its own self-perpetuating industry, and it feels really on the cusp of being commercially driven. And so it's just a really exciting time right now to be in the space industry. Next slide, please. So high level, what do we do to put people in space? Well, we plan, we train, and we fly. So there's lots and lots of planning go into it. I'm sure much with Sarah Elizabeth's missions, you plan, and then you plan some more. And then you triple check your plans and you plan again. But that's all because these are very expensive missions with very high stakes, and you want to get it right. NASA operates a little bit differently from companies like SpaceX who, fail fast, fail often, and blow up a bunch of rockets because hardware is expensive or hardware is cheap and people are expensive. When we have people on board our rockets, people on board the space station, and we're using taxpayers' money, there's a much higher focus on being good stewards of that. So it's a more deliberate pace with a lot of planning and trying to get it right the first time. So next slide, please. Training. This is one of the funnest things I got to do and still keep my toe in it as much as I can. And that is, in addition to supporting the real-time operations inside of mission control, I was also responsible for training the people behind me. And so training junior flight controllers and getting them up to snuff, as well as training the crew. And so this is Kate Rubens here sitting in the lab. That's not me. It was my buddy Skylar who was teaching a lesson. And so Kate Rubens was preparing for one of her environmental control lessons. And that's a similar role that I got to do very frequently. And it's really fun to get those one-on-one relationships with the crew. Next slide, please. All right, and then the execution. So plan, train, fly. Flying is sitting on console and doing the actual missions, and that stuff is so much fun. you know, like I said earlier, I'm getting ready to hit 20 years here. I don't sit console real time and mission control anymore, but absolutely the most fun that I've had in my time here is when I was in that early career phase doing supporting the missions real time, being responsible for if something would break, being directly responsible for the health and the safety of the crew as they were up there. You know, you get older and life changes, and it gets you gotta. It gets harder to work overnight shifts, and also you're responsible for coaching baseball and doing other things that have led me to take on a more of a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 kind of role. But it's awesome because I still hire and train junior flight controllers and really get to help put the best and the brightest in there to support the astronauts on board their vehicles. Next slide, please. Okay, so I started out as a flight controller for the thermal systems. We all have cool, you know, console code names, and so I was a Thor for 7 years. I got to do during the joint shuttle timeframe. Got to do many joint missions. I got to be an increment lead. I got to do leadership roles for the joint shuttle space station timeframes. You know, like ULF3. I got to be a subject matter expert, the lead subject matter expert for the internal thermal control system for some time. I got to be responsible for the venting of ammonia from a torn radiator face sheet to prevent it from tearing and venting on its own more than we would have wanted to. Then I moved after 7 years into a job called Houston Support Group, where I would go over to Moscow for 3 to 4 months at a time and work with the Russian flight controllers in Mission Control Center Moscow. And so I did integration between the US and the Russians, and sometimes integration between the Russians and the Russians. And got to just live and work out of Moscow, which was pre-war in Ukraine. So it was less tense than things are now, but I enjoyed that experience so much. So the bottom right there is a picture of me in front of St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. And then the picture of the rocket launches, I actually got to go down to Kazakhstan for a Progress cargo vehicle launch. And I could talk to you for an hour about that trip to Kazakhstan because it had so many very interesting aspects to it, but it was just a lot of fun. But then my wife and I were expecting our first child, so it no longer was. I no longer wanted to be away for 3 to 4 months at a time, so I moved on to the next group. So next slide, please. I was kind of done supporting console, so I came back and I did a lot of instructional work. I was instructor to junior flight controllers, instructors, and an instructor to astronauts in the Spartan group, so doing electrical stuff as well as thermal control stuff. And I was supporting CST-100 for a while, which is the Boeing vehicle that, fingers crossed, is actually finally going to launch crew on it. Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams here in May or early June, so within a couple months. And then I got selected as a contractor manager, so did lots of recruiting, hiring, a little bit of firing, but a whole lot of recruiting, hiring. And I got my, did kind of the norm what other people had been doing, recruited from the local schools and other things. And once I got my feet under me after about a year and a half, I said, you know what, there need to be more Jayhawks here. So I started, I got us to go up to the KU Career Fair, and I started recruiting quite a few Jayhawks. And last time we did this presentation, there were, I think, 4 people on the call that I had hired. So that was a really good feeling for me to give back to the University of Kansas in such an impactful and ongoing manner. I mean, University of Kansas loves it when grads send them money, and but I figure what's an even better gift? I can send jobs to current students, and so I've taken a lot of pride in that. I did that for a while. Then I moved over to the mission systems engineering right at the beginning of the pandemic, and that was an odd experience to move to a new group that was very. It was a sharp left turn for me, and to manage a lot of people I didn't know during the pandemic, but it was a tremendous learning opportunity, and I was very responsible for the ground facilities. So how do you send data through mission control? How do you get data from the space station? How do you do networking and a lot of stuff that I had not thought much about in my career. So that was really awesome. And also doing the engineering of the simulator. So I did that for a couple of years and was happy doing that. And then next slide, please. I was tapped on the shoulder and asked to come over and support medical operations. So now I am responsible for hiring and training a lot of the biomedical engineers, which I'm, again, a mechanical, but this is exciting. I also am responsible for the flight surgeons. And so we have our fingers in all the different programs. We're responsible for astronaut health and conditioning, and basically anything that has to do with potential impacts to astronaut health and well-being while on board one of the space vehicles. We've got our hands in it early in the planning process, during the actual mission execution. I've even got a couple flight surgeons en route to Kazakhstan right now for the potential undock of Laurel coming here in a couple days, where she will return to Earth and land in Kazakhstan, and then immediately get on a plane and come back to Houston, where we will immediately start her post-mission science collection, blood and urine and everything else, as well as physical reconditioning. So she's been exercising 2 hours a day her entire year on board the space station, but she's still going to have some adjustment period getting back used to 1G or Earth gravity. And so we're going to be getting her right back into some exercise routines and making sure that she is healthy and cared for and has optimum chances for a quick recovery to terrestrial living. So very exciting stuff. Some of the pictures on here are, astronaut suit checking dexterity, and so involved in next generation suits. Artemis vehicle landing, make sure the crew is fine during when they land. Various space vehicles, whether it be Artemis or SpaceX, both do water landings. Let's see, the next generation EHP program will have a vehicle on the moon. Bottom and center left, HLS program. On the left bottom is the conceptual design from Blue Origin, and the bottom center is the conceptual design from SpaceX. Interesting part about SpaceX, I don't know if you can tell in here, but there are little baby specks at the bottom of the Starship vehicle, and those are astronauts. That Starship vehicle is huge. They could theoretically carry 100 people to the moon if you had enough fuel once that thing gets going, and it's all in Elon's vision of populating Mars. So exciting stuff. On board the space station, we're responsible for all the exercise equipment, which gets a lot of use and likes to break a lot. So we spend a lot of our time. This right here is Luca Parmigiano. I struggle with his last name in Italian, who's been to the space station a couple times. Next slide. All right, so I'll skip any backup slides. Don't need to go in there. So they're actually fairly out of date as well. But all of the things that I am doing now and have been able to do are a direct result of my engineering degree from the University of Kansas. And there are tremendous opportunities available in so many different fields. So many doors open to you when you finish with the degree in engineering from University of Kansas, and you are set up for success. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chris.
Thanks, Andrew. So for a little bit of context, the Laurel he's referring to is Laurel O'Hara, current KU astronaut who's in space at the moment on ISS. She had a great call with us about a month ago. I think Sarah Elizabeth was on that call among many others. KU's got a pretty incredible history of producing astronauts. All the astronauts we produce have actually had fairly illustrious space careers, from Joe Engle in the X-15 and piloting the space shuttle for the first time, and I believe the second time, and the first time to space. The first civilian to go to space, Steve Hawley, is a KU professor. Yeah, it's a pretty cool program. You'll meet some neat people. And again, thank you, Andrew. As he said, he's been recruiting hard. Some of my favorite students are down there with him right now, I think, from Olivia. It's been there a while. And Zach and Kylie and Maddie. So yeah, it's pretty crazy to think the things you dream of doing like as a kid and a high schooler. Today, the things we do in the program weren't even options when Sarah Elizabeth and Andrew came through. They've got 2 active satellite programs. The rocketry design team is like nothing I think we've ever had. So it's pretty crazy. These people have done some amazing things, and just gets more interesting all the time. So on that note, I'm actually going to turn it over to a couple current students who are working on the satellite design team. here at the university to give you a little bit more insight about what they're doing physically on campus on the space side. There are a couple ways to work with NASA at KU. The CubeSat is a big one of them, and the Center for Remote Sensing and Integrated Systems, which does a tremendous amount of work right here on campus, is another. But for now, let's hear from the students on the CubeSat team.
Chris, can you guys see the screen fine? Awesome. Okay, so my name is Brody Gatta. I am a PhD student in aerospace engineering here at KU. I graduated with my bachelor's degree from KU last spring, and I'm joined by Aaron Hastings. He is a master's student in aerospace, and he also graduated this past fall semester with his bachelor's from KU. So CubeSat was founded to give students at the University of Kansas the opportunity to design, build, and launch CubeSats. We work with real space hardware. We have a real satellite that will hopefully be finally getting launched in the next few months. And so this, our club gives a great opportunity to put the classroom skills you've learned to the test and actually apply it in a real world scenario. In addition to just working in the engineering process, we have a lot of leadership opportunities. We have over 10 leadership positions, so you can develop leadership skills as well as work on communication skills by doing presentations like these and other outreach events. Our team is comprised of over 50 members, so there is a lot of teamwork that goes on, and you get to experience both the highs and lows of working in a team. And just overall, we are a organization dedicated to helping students further their professional development and become better engineers. I've got a brief history of CubeSats at KU for you. In the early 2000s, there was a PhD student named Marco Villa who was working on a CubeSat, and he did design and build that CubeSat. Unfortunately, when they went to launch it, the vehicle, it was a Russian rocket, and it ended up not making it to space. And so since then, KU hadn't really done anything with CubeSats, but in 2018, a group of students got together and they decided to create the CubeSat organization as we know today. And so NASA has this program called the CubeSat Launch Initiative, and they have the goal of getting a CubeSat launched from every state. And unfortunately, Kansas is one of the few states that still hasn't done that. And so that was kind of the initial goal of what started the organization as we know it today. And like I said before, CubeSat 1 is on track to launch in the next few months, and we've started work on the design stage of CubeSat 2. So with CSLI, NASA has partnered us with Firefly Aerospace. They're a relatively new company, which means it was quick and easy for us to get a spot on one of their rockets. Unfortunately, that means that they're still figuring things out, and they've ended up delaying our launch by about 3 years. But it finally seems like we are actually going to be launching. We're actually booking plane tickets in the next couple of weeks to go out and put the satellite on the rocket. So we're excited about that. Once we finally do get into space, we're going to be in a 500-kilometer orbit. And so we're going to go around the Earth about every 94 minutes. And we're going to be in a sun-synchronous orbit. So we'll constantly be in sunlight, which is advantageous because it means we need smaller batteries since we can almost constantly generate power. This is the design of CubeSat 1. We mainly have off-the-shelf components, and that's just because we wanted to make sure that we were using reliable hardware and we wouldn't have an issue once we get up in space. Our 2 payloads were provided by the School of Physics. We have the PCRD and the HiCal-K. How they work exactly is a little over my head, but they're both cosmic ray detectors, and they'll get some really cool data that the physicists want. This is a picture of the CubeSat without its solar panels on. And if you're not familiar with the CubeSat, CubeSats are made up of units, which are 10 by 10 centimeters, 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. And so our CubeSat is a 3U, so it's 10 by 10 by 30. So it's pretty small, but we can pack a lot in there. And I've got another picture with the solar panels on here. It weighs about 4 kilograms, so tiny, but there's a lot going on in that package. This is a little breakout of the CubeSat. This is one of our CAD models, and we do this so we can make sure that everything fits in the satellite, as well as kind of think about how thermal considerations will affect things like where we want our heaters to be, what components can be hot, what can be cold, and things like that. And so typically our team has a few sub-teams. Since we're in a stage where we have a completed satellite, we've actually shifted to having 2 design teams that are going through and designing new satellites, which Aaron will talk about in a little bit. But next fall, we're probably going to shift back to the structure of these teams. So I'll tell you a little bit about what you could be doing if you join us at KU. So we have a communications team. This team is focused on developing our ground station, which is the antenna and the radio and everything at KU that lets us communicate with the satellite, as well as the equipment on the satellite that lets us talk with it. The communication team also gets the chance to write a conference paper and present. It alternates between being in Phoenix and Las Vegas. So we actually got to go to Las Vegas last fall. And so that's a very fun trip, and the school pays for it. And it's a great time. The structures team is responsible for the frame, making sure that everything fits together, as well as thinking about the thermal considerations that will be there. Software team does all of the coding. They make sure that all of the different components can communicate with one another. They make backup plans, and they've also developed a way so we can send updates to the satellite once it's up there in case anything needs to be changed. The power team looks at the batteries and the solar panels. They make sure that we're producing more power than we're consuming. And if we go into eclipse, that we know our batteries will be able to last. They're also responsible for developing a low power mode. So if for some reason we drop way below what we're expected to be at in terms of power level, we can shut the non-critical systems down and make sure that we can keep the satellite operating as long as possible. Our systems team is kind of the catch-all for everything else. They handled the ADCS, which is the Attitude Determination and Control System. That's how the satellite knows where it is, and also it can control its angular momentum, so it's not spinning around. They're responsible for handling payload integration, making sure that the data can be stored properly, and making sure it works with the system. And then just overall system integration, making sure all the components will work with one another. The operations team will be a new team. They're going to finish anything else we have for CubeSat 1, as well as create our mission plans for operating the satellite, as well as handling the uplink and downlink commands once the satellite is up in orbit. And I will hand it over to Aaron to tell you about our current progress and future plans.
Okay, so like what Brody was mentioning, we currently have 2 design teams working at the same time designing CubeSat 2. This is only an initial design phase. We'll go into further designs later on in the process. So these 2 teams, we have one team which has selected a mass spectrometer as their payload, which they'll determine the particle makeup of their chosen orbit. The other team, which I so happen to be a part of, is choosing a radar imaging system, which will either scan ice sheets or crop health. Currently, we're looking into components such as like batteries, solar panels, onboard computers, determination and control systems, antennas, communication systems, and the possibility of propulsion systems. Toward the end of the semester, these 2 teams will be defending their proposal to the CubeSat organization, and we'll move on from there, kind of choosing the best concepts from both teams to go further into the CubeSat 2 design. You can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. So similar to what we did for CubeSat 1, we'll go into the separate teams, such as like the power team, the structures team, and then we'll kind of go further into like a deep dive analysis for CubeSat 2. We might also be purchasing components almost pretty soon, maybe by next fall. we'll be creating a proposal for NASA's CSLI program, which will be providing a launch rideshare on a launch vehicle. You can go to the next slide. So as we close our presentation, we'd like to thank you all for listening. We appreciate being a part of this event. If you'd like to follow us and kind of or join us, you could contact us through our email, which is cubesat@ku.edu. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, which those are, I believe, cube_sat, a little bit different than the email. But I guess we'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I did have one more thing I wanted to mention. Our organization does have a lot of aerospace engineers, but we are open to anybody on campus, even if you're not in engineering. At one point, we had a couple of chemical engineers, and I know we also have a number of mechanical engineers. So we're open to everyone. So whatever you end up deciding on for college, you can certainly come help us out. But yeah, thank you all for listening.
Thank you, gentlemen. So there are a lot of different exposures to space in college these days and beyond. I know I've talked to a lot of my colleagues, including folks on this call. These things didn't necessarily exist when you guys were in college yourselves, and you'd be able to do these incredible careers. But just imagine if you'd had that exposure that early. So it's really an exciting time. We do have some amazing alumni that we can help. Credit for that, including Marco Villa. Of SpaceX fame, and now Tyvak nanosatellite that's helped provide some of this guidance. It's helped set the footprint for the future leaders that are building these programs today. So with that said, we've got some current folks that we want to make sure we introduce. We have some current students on the call. Brian. Or Ryan.
Yep, we have them there unmuting. If the three of you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourselves.
Yeah, hi guys. My name's Caleb. I'm a junior here at KU studying aerospace engineering.
Hi everyone, my name's Carissa. I'm also a junior studying aerospace here.
And my name's Simon. I'm a sophomore studying aerospace here.
So this is usually the most popular portion of the night. If you guys want to put questions in the chat, we'll work through any questions you have for the alumni, the current students, or otherwise, and just kind of let you guys avail yourselves of the resources that we have here tonight, taking their time to talk to you, the experience of a current student or an alum, somebody that works at JPL or NASA Houston. Yeah, what kind of questions you guys have for us?
So we had some submitted ahead of time. I'll go ahead and read one so we can, while people are typing, we can kind of get going. So I guess the first one we had was, what does a typical day at NASA and or JPL look like?
I'll start, Andrew. So I don't know that there really is a single typical day. As an example, I guess now we're in April. So the month of March for me was actually pretty intense. There was 1 week where we were conducting what we call an operational readiness test, an ORT, for one of the missions I was working on, Lunar Trailblazer. And so the idea, kind of like Andrew talked about this very well for what he does. And even though we're not working with humans on our missions here at JPL, if we still have to plan things very carefully, because if something breaks, there's no human there to fix it. And so we want to plan everything. We want to test everything as thoroughly as we can before we send a spacecraft out into space, so that we have an idea of what the behaviors of that spacecraft will look like. If something goes wrong, how could we potentially fix it, from millions of miles away? And so for, I think it was the first week of March, we were in an operational readiness test for Lunar Trailblazer, where in real time, we were simulating the launch and then the first 72 hours of the mission. So working odd hours overnight, And so we were getting simulated data, trying to figure out where the spacecraft was, working through any anomalies as they came up, supporting meetings, making decisions about what maneuvers to execute on board the spacecraft to make sure it was staying on the intended trajectory. So that was very intense for 1 week. And then the next week, I was supporting a series of meetings for another project I'm working on called NEO Surveyor. It's a space telescope that is going to launch in 2027 to look for asteroids that are potentially coming toward the Earth. And so it was a week-long meeting with folks who don't actually work at JPL, but who are still supporting the mission. And I didn't get into this, but space now is a very, well, maybe I shouldn't say it like that. The space industry now, right, is a very big industry. And so oftentimes you're working with people either from different companies, maybe even different countries. And so NEO Surveyor falls into that camp. So we have folks that we work with out in Colorado. And so they had come to JPL for a week-long series of in-person, face-to-face meetings to work through a bunch of development analyses and development tasks that we are trying to get done. So we're still in the design stage a little bit for that mission. So working through, okay, if we make this design decision, how will that impact the operations of the spacecraft? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? So I was doing that for a second week. And then last week, I was in another operational readiness test, but for a different mission for Europa Clipper. And so that was the same kind of thing where we were simulating data. We were trying to figure out what was going on board the spacecraft, making decisions about what maneuvers to execute, working through any anomalies. So the last 3 weeks were perhaps more exciting than usual, but also more intense than usual. So a slightly more typical day. It kind of depends on the project I'm working on. But there's a lot of software development actually for what I do, which was a little bit of a shock because I do not consider myself a software engineer. I am not necessarily a programmer, at least that wasn't, what I took tons of courses in at KU. I had exposure to it, but that wasn't where I felt my strengths lied. And then I got to JPL and they said, okay, we need you to write software to do this. And so I said, okay, I guess I'll go figure out how to do that then for you. And so one of the things I always try to tell students is that when you graduate, you have a great set of skills, you have a great set of knowledge, but you don't know everything. And so it's really kind of a springboard to continue to learn in your career. And so I think one of the great things about KU, and Andrew talked about this, is that not only do you learn sort of the fundamental, technical background that you obviously, have to have, but you learn how to learn. You learn how, if I'm given a task that I don't know how to do right now, how can I go figure it out? How do I start approaching solving this problem? And so that's a really valuable skill that you have to learn in addition to, your fluid dynamics or, how to program things in C++. So that was a long winding answer, but a lot of, I think, software development, I'm supporting meetings. I'm not quite as important as Andrew yet in my job. I've been at JPL almost 10 years now, so I'm not a manager quite yet, but I'm starting to, do more leadership roles. So I'm training folks a bunch now as well. And I enjoy that a lot, actually. So those types of things, hopefully that answers a little bit.
Management is overrated. Keep your feet in the technical world. I don't, in terms of day-to-day, my day-to-day has a lot of variability as well, but I don't have well, I will say that it's awesome that it's not the same thing every day. I have opportunities to do teaching, mentoring. There are days when I've got to buckle down and spend a lot of time in spreadsheets looking at data trending. And in my particular role, a lot of times that's financial trending. And it's actuarial science, which I, was not trained as economics or, finance, but, you figure it out and you learn, and engineering school prepared me well. I will say one of the classes that I enjoyed the least in the process of getting my mechanical engineering degree was circuits. And when I graduated, I thought to myself, I will be happy if I never touch an electrical circuit again. It's voodoo, it's smoke and mirrors, and, jokingly. And then 10 years down the road in my career, I ended up teaching electrical systems of the space station to astronauts, people with doctorates in engineering, very wise people, but I was responsible for teaching them about our system and how to live and operate safely with it. And so, you never stop learning, you never stop growing, you never stop expanding the skill set. So.
There's a question here about the CubeSat. So Brody or Aaron, if you want to answer, it's not competitive. It's very easy to get started. Can you guys talk about how you got started, or how kids get involved?
Yeah, I guess it's a little misleading. Aaron and I are both grad students now, but I started when I was a freshman, and I became the president my junior year. So, yeah, we're open to everybody. We have lots of undergrads. We're actually majority undergrads, and we have a lot of undergrads in leadership positions as well. Yeah, we are open to everybody.
Yeah, I think that
Competitive. Go ahead.
I think the way I got in was I think it was either sophomore or junior year. I was actually contacted by a fellow professor who CubeSat was reaching out to him to look for undergrad students. So it's actually quite open to both undergrad and grad. And there's really something that I've been amazed at is that your input is quite valuable. So it's like you can actually make a change to whatever design you're working on. So it's a very amazing program or an organization. So
One of the things that we don't appreciate a lot about college students, so you probably think of your peers in high school, is that kids are unreliable. And so literally in college, showing up and doing what you're supposed to when you're supposed to be there is half the battle. If you have a passion for working on the spacecraft or the Jack Motorsports car, just being there and doing your role and carrying your weight is half the battle. So you're going to gravitate towards people who have the same interests, and those who show up and do it are going to take leadership roles pretty quickly. So it's very democratic in that sense. Also very easy to get involved. This is a really good question in the chat, a very common question. What are the things that you did in high school to prepare? Maybe what turned you on to this? Chris has already got a great answer in the chat. Stereotypically, we lead with the math. I always say I didn't like math in high school, but you will use it every day as an engineer. And so preparing now in high school is the best thing you can do. If you're like Carissa and you like math and you're good at math, you'll be very well served. Being able to do enough math is enough a lot of the time. But really, do you guys want to talk about like some of the things you did that helped you get excited about the field or figure out maybe what you want to do, whether that was a class or outside the classroom?
I'll add on a bit to my comment. So, like at the end, I kind of mentioned outside of class because while you get some learning experience within the classroom, I think what really fueled my interest in engineering and at least aerospace engineering was the clubs I was engaged in. At least at my school, we had like robotics and there was another one called Girls in Engineering. And so we got to be more hands-on with what engineering was. And even like growing up, my mom's actually in the Air Force, so I had like lots of exposure to like planes and stuff. And so that's kind of what fueled it more for me when I was in high school.
You can't
Yeah.
really do engineering in a high school classroom. Like there's all these academies and whatnot, but unless you're doing calc-based physics on a problem, it's not really engineering yet. But there are a lot of things you can do to do programming or problem solving like robotics. So I think it's more the discernment than the prep probably, but were you gonna say something, Caleb?
Yeah, I think if maybe the math or the physics seems like not a great place for you to start, maybe that doesn't sound exciting. There's lots of other ways that you can get involved and get exposed to exciting engineering principles. There's all kinds of events or competitions you can participate in. KU always hosts a high school design competition for students to work on engineering topics in fun ways that aren't going to require a ton of math, but there's still the exciting science that goes into it.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, what if you're not good at physics? The beauty of engineering is you don't have to be good at everything. You need to be able to do certain things. Sometimes it's just pulling yourself over a bar. I think last time we did this, Andrew, we had two students that were asked about their favorite classes, and one said, well, I failed circuits 1 twice. I hated it, just like Andrew did. And then the other student said, really? Because I love circuits. There will be things that you find you're good at and things you find you're bad at. Sometimes you don't know until you're middle of it. But you'll gravitate towards the things you're good at. Math is a keystone because physics just turns into math. You simply have to have that background to be able to solve certain kinds of problems, but we're pretty good about getting you to the right level so you can progress into other things too. Does anyone want to talk about favorite engineering classes, alumni or current students?
I guess I can speak a little bit on this. So, I feel like this is an unpopular answer for a lot of people, but I'm really enjoying my thermodynamics class, which has a reputation for being very difficult. But for me, I enjoy that challenge, and it's really actually kind of cool to see, how the fundamental things that you're learning about, like fundamental physics equations and calculus, can be applied in a real world setting. Like every single problem we do in that class is something that is in the real world. So we're learning about like power plants and stuff. And while that may not seem very applicable to aerospace, it very much is. And it's just a really cool way to just apply your learning in different real world ways.
Is it still Dr. Tempest?
He actually retired, I believe, this year. I'm having Dr. Depsick, so.
Okay.
People love Depsick. There was a head-to-head for a number of years where you could pick, and Depsick was always known to be harder. But over time, people started picking Depsick because, I mean, he's got such a good command of the material, right? I love how Carissa was giving a thumbs down, even as right next to Simon. Simon's talking about thermo. Most people don't like thermo, including Chris, I'm going to guess. And that's everything you do at this level, you're doing as a team of people. You always work as a team of people in the real world. And so your team of friends or colleagues that have the same interests, as you go through 1 week, you're learning something in statics mechanics and you just hate it. You don't get it. It's not intuitive. And all your friends pull you through. And the next week you get to thermo and all of a sudden it makes sense to you. Well, the beauty of that is you're gonna start looking for problems that require thermodynamics, right? They play on your strengths. You avoid your weaknesses. Like I said, you don't have to be good at everything. Everyone specializes as they go to a certain degree. Sarah Elizabeth, any favorite classes you recall or have nightmares about to this day?
Well, one of my favorite classes was actually not quite an engineering class. It was one that Steve Hawley taught. So Dr. Wiles mentioned he was a former astronaut. And so he taught a class called The Search for Extraterrestrial Life out of the astronomy department. And it was a really interesting class for obvious reasons based on the title. But I think one of the valuable things that I took out of that class was the value of communication. And so I know that students who are interested in going into engineering may not want to hear what I'm about to say, but communication is really important. Being able to write well is really important. Being able to speak well is really important. You have to be able to clearly communicate your ideas to get people to care about them. You may have the greatest idea for a new power source or a new cooling system or, a thermal protectant for your spacecraft. But if you can't convey that idea to people who care, it's not going to go anywhere. And so one of the interesting things that Dr. Hawley talked about in that class was when he was an astronaut, his background academically had been in science, but I guess he'd taken a couple of engineering classes or maybe he had family who were engineers. I can't quite remember now. But he was well suited to be sort of at that interface between science and engineering. And so, engineers want to optimize and do things in the way that makes the most sense for the health and safety of the spacecraft or the health and safety of the instrument. The scientists want to do things in the order in which you maximize the scientific return. And those two things may not always agree. And so the engineers are irritated because the scientists want them to do something out of order that doesn't make any sense. The scientists are irritated because the engineers won't do what they want. And so it takes someone who understands both sides to be able to tell each side to say, hey, wait a minute, this is why they're saying this. This is why they want to do it this way to make everyone happy so that you can overall as a team, as a project, maximize the return. And so that was very valuable to hear that example, but then, I can apply that in my engineering classes, which I did. And then I also can apply it in my job now because yes, I'm not a scientist, but I interact with scientists. And so, when we're designing a trajectory for Europa Clipper at Europa, there are certain things that we have to do to make the science possible at Europa. But as soon as we start telling scientists, oh, sure, well, we can do this, or sure, we can do that, the scientists start to get greedy and say, well, can you do this too? Can you do that too? Can you, fly by even slower? Can you fly by even lower? And at some point we have to tell them, well, no, sorry, we can't, we can't do that. But you have to be able to tell them why so that you don't have World War III on your hands.
The classrooms these days pedagogically are kind of neat, and that a lot of what you do is done as a team. And so we're not talking about standing up and giving speeches. You are going to be an expert on what you're studying by the time you're done with it. And you need to be able to communicate that to other people that have a high level understanding of the field. So being able to work as a team and share your ideas to other teams of people, by the time you get through college, you'll have done it dozens, if not hundreds of times. And so we're not going to ask you, put you on the spot and have you stand up and ask us how to cook a chocolate chip cookie by memory, right? No, this is very much in your field, but it's absolutely essential to being successful as a professional. What we're finding today is graduates have a lot more of those skills because you're going to learn it by doing it. So you will find that a lot more comfortable. If you dread doing speech class today, you'll be a technical speaker by the time you get out of college. So don't sweat too much. Here's a great question. How difficult is the workload of becoming an aerospace engineer? Is it as difficult as medical school? I think most engineers would say medical school is easy compared to engineering. Not a lot have that context, but that I've advised a lot of smart people over the years in all majors at this institution. And I would say most people, I think, would say aerospace engineering is the most difficult of all majors, and that engineering is the most difficult area to study, period. Empirically, there's a lot of data on that. Now, the good news is we have the highest graduation rate at this university at 77%. Our kids are way more likely to get through in 4 than students almost anywhere else in this country. So you have a lot of help, but it sort of begs a question for me. Like, if you're on this call and you want to be any of these people growing up, you're going to find the way to study these things, right? There will be days you don't know what's going on, and no one else in your class does either, in times that are hard, but you're going to do it together and realize a lot of us dreamed of working at NASA. How many people are actually doing it? Well, this is the pathway to get you there. So everything in your life is not rocket science, except when you're taking rocket science with Dr. Degavi. But Dr. Degavi's nickname is Easy A Ray because he's the world's sweetest human being, and he's going to make sure you get through it. But turn it over to the students. What do you think? You're right in the middle of it now. Junior year is actually one of those famous pinch points. So how do you find it? You know, how do you get through? Is it worth it?
I think it's definitely worth it. It is a little tough. There are some nights where you'll be staying up late depending on what your workload is that semester. I don't know if it's like as hard as med school because I think it's different levels of hardness and what you're focusing on because I don't have to memorize different bone structures, but I do have to learn how to use multiple different softwares. And so I'll be staying up late messing with one software, then maybe I'll be making a CAD model for something else or another class. And I'm also involved in different clubs. So there's always a lot of work that I'll be doing. But I think with engineering, I kind of mentioned in my like little paragraph I said, I can like see my results while I'm doing it, which is very satisfying to me and kind of keeps me going. So it's definitely worth it. Some people may not think so. They don't like putting in hard work, but I mean, I kind of had like that dream of I want to be an astronaut. I'm going to put in the work. So I know it's not easy, and knowing it's not easy, and then you finish it and you get a good grade, I think it's even more rewarding.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And what people often overlook is that while it gets a lot harder, you know, at your time at KU, you also get a lot better at learning and figuring out how to teach yourself stuff and just adapting to challenges. And so it really is, you know, overcomable difficulty as long as you just stay focused. So it's nothing to, you know, be too worried about. As long as you stay focused, it's certainly everything's achievable.
And one of the biggest things that Kylie told me, who is down there in Houston with you folks, is when I asked this question her junior year, I said, how hard is it right now? And she said, well, that's a tricky question. If I was alone, like 1 to 10 scale, it'd be an 11, go home and cry myself to sleep every night. But it's not. She was at a table with 4 of us, including Zach, who married her since and is also down there at NASA Houston. And she said, together with this group of 4 people, we do everything together. And it's like a 5. Like we all complain, we all piss and moan together, but like we all get through it together too. And man, it makes all the difference in the world. So being a part of a cohort is very new for a lot of people in high school. You do it with really smart people. They're pulling you through, you're helping them. And at the end of the day, it's 4 years. That's the difference between this and medical schools. It is very hard for a while, but man, what an investment for the rest of your life. You're doing exciting work. that you love. You're an expert problem solver in a million things. You get to do things that nobody else can do. That kind of leads to the next question. Is a bachelor's degree enough? What kind of majors do you guys interact with the most? Sarah, Elizabeth, and Andrew. It's certainly aerospace by far. I'm seeing more computer science. Andrew has a mechanical degree. I'm also seeing way more people go into it with BS degrees, at least from KU, than I historically was the case. A lot of the folks I named, I think, only had BSs coming out, but can you guys speak to those two topics?
I will say that in the particular area that I'm in right now, we do focus more heavily on hiring biomechanical engineers because we need people with more of a medical focus. But in the previous 17 years of my career, basically, I was hiring, I was very open and willing to hire electrical, aerospace, mechanical, physics majors, chemical engineering, whatever, because I knew that people who came out of school with that Bachelor of Science in Engineering had exhibited the ability to grasp difficult concepts and an ability to stick with it when something gets difficult. Because if you have finished an engineering degree, it means you've been through some big, difficult stuff and you've stuck with it over several years. And you know, I would tend to focus on my interviewing, a lot of behavioral interviewing, on talking about the struggles that people went through and how they overcame them. If I ever interviewed somebody who got through engineering school without a struggle at all, I probably didn't hire them because they probably weren't going to work out real well in my environment. It's that ability to take that troubleshooting, problem solving skill set that an engineering degree helps you get and then apply that to the job at hand. You're not going to come out of engineering school with the perfect skill set to, you know, take off running on day one and operate at the highest level. You're going to have to learn in your environment what it is your new employer wants you to do and what it is you need to do to get that satellite in space, get that crew trained, to get the vehicle operated safely. And we'll teach you that. But having that engineering degree shows that you have the ability to master that kind of information and operate in that kind of environment. I don't know if I answered the question at all. I might have gone left field, but
No, I think that's great.
Yeah, and I guess I would say overall at JPL, I think like the stat is somewhere around, you know, a third. So a third bachelor, a third master, a third PhD. And that's across all jobs at JPL. So different areas, you know, maybe have a different distribution. What I do is fairly specialized. And so a master's for what I do is pretty much the minimum. Most of the people I work with, I think, have PhDs. I feel like I snuck in some days with just having a master's. But there are other jobs at JPL where we have, you know, bachelors, some mechanicals, people who are doing like hardware test, fabrication, that sort of stuff. So it kind of depends on what you want to do.
There's an interesting question here about when applying for a position at NASA. And I know Andrew's done a lot of hiring. How much does the university you went to play into that? And I think maybe a lot of people think name of university. But I'm going to take that question maybe as I think most of us will look at is what do you do in college? Maybe the opportunities that you have in college. Getting experience in some of these fields is invaluable. I mean, again, how many people these days are going to design a satellite and go through what Brody and Andrew are doing right now, right? Like having experience is sort of the most valuable thing you could have and maybe the hardest thing to get. So we had a student last spring on this call, Jordan, who was a fairly recent hire, and somebody asked her how she got that job because I believe she came straight out. I'm sure she did. And she told the story of her freshman year of college. She was working in the composite lab, which we all know and love right over here behind me, working on large unmanned aerial vehicles, in this case, ice penetrating radar arrays for a NASA mission. And they had built this like $600,000 array, and they'd taken it down to the anechoic chamber and fastened it down, and it wasn't properly attached, and it fell over and broke. And we always ask this corny question in many interviews, talk about a time you failed. Well, let me tell you right now, if you get that question and you can point to real experience on a NASA mission working on very expensive, very valuable equipment, doing really high-end work and learning a lesson from that. That's not something a lot of people can do. So when I talk to students, it's about, we have a satellite program that's pretty amazing. There aren't a lot of those. Did you join that program? Did you show up and do the work you were supposed to do? Do you work in Dr. Hale's lab? Those are the things that employers tell us that they look for. And those are why we see students with BS degrees getting incredible jobs straight out, is they had those experiences, right? They went and got that in college. It didn't just pass them by. And most people aren't going to care about your GPA nearly to the extent they will what you've done. So I don't know if you guys want to jump on that point or disagree or say otherwise.
No, I agree, and this sounds a little bit cliche, but I've hired one person with a 3.95 GPA or above, and that individual was just kind of off scale, unique, because he was also a Division I collegiate athlete and somehow managed to do all this and get an engineering degree. But by and large, a lot of the people with 4.0s, either one, have never struggled at something and don't know how to persevere and overcome, or two, I ask a lot of stuff about working in teams and needing to deal with conflicts and come to resolutions. And a lot of times people with extremely high GPAs tend to point fingers at everybody else and never accept any blame, because how could I have done something wrong with my perfect GPA? And that's a huge red flag what I'm going for. So I hired Jordan. I was very interested in her experience working on real hardware and doing real stuff, and her ability to own up to her mistakes. And then what did you learn from it and do above and beyond that? And also, when I interviewed her, she talked about her role being the president of the Ultimate Frisbee women's team, and the conflict resolution, the managing of the team dynamics had to go with that, because we're all part of a team here. I don't have people just sitting at their computer and living in a box typing away for 40 hours a week. They're all part of a broader team, and I need people who can interact and be part of that. So yeah, having that experience, just get out there and do something. If it's an NASA mission, great. If it's not, if it's the ice penetrating thing, I forget if that's NASA funded or not, but if it's, I don't know, so let's theoretically say that KU comes up with a new program in the aerospace department to do a solar powered plane, or maybe you've already done that, right? But just get involved. Just start small, be one of the guys who's there turning a wrench and learning. And by your second year, you're going to be leading one of the subsystem teams. I mean, things move quick, and you gain a tremendous amount of responsibility really quickly, even in an environment like that. And that all translates to your development and your career down the road.
College is the world's biggest buffet. There are hundreds of different organizations that you could do. You can play sports. You can be a world-class musician. Many of our students are. You're not going to join 10 clubs, though. You're going to find the things you actually care about, and you're going to spend a great amount of time doing them. And so just be true to yourself. Figure out if you love French, you're going to want to go study abroad and do language immersion. If you're doing it for your parents, you won't. Same thing with music or 100 other things. So find out what those things are and get involved. And so everyone here is research active. Go find that professor that does the work you want to do and go start getting that experience. It makes the real world very approachable, because you're working in that space. You're learning about that. How many employers find the perfect kid who's been working on Hall thrusters in a lab? Well, I tell you what, if you do that work, you decide that's what you want to do, you're a pretty good candidate for that job. So a lot of it is exploration, getting involved, getting that experience. You all figure it out eventually, but yeah, that's always good advice, I think, is just start somewhere, put down a marker and go from there. Let's see, there's a question about what's the hardest challenge you've overcome in your, I don't know, academic career or professional career? Did you guys have Jan Roscom back in the day? No. Jan Roscom wrote the textbook on aircraft design. Famous, like most prolific aircraft designer in human history, but also a heck of a difficult professor, I'm told.
Yeah, no, I didn't have Jan Roscom. He was still around, but wasn't actively teaching when I was at KU. I think an interesting, I guess, challenge maybe isn't necessarily a technical one. It's working with people. And that's not because engineers hate people. It's not because engineers are bad people. It's because engineers are very smart people and they have strong opinions. And so how do you manage very strong opinions when they're very different? And so that's kind of a generic challenge, I guess. One of the things I feel like I'm currently working through is sort of this like long challenge, I guess. One of the missions I'm working on, I'm not going to call it out specifically. If you Google it, you'll be able to figure out which one it is. But one of the missions I'm working on is what we call a ride share. And so that means that spacecraft is going up into space with other things, other spacecraft. And so we are not the primary, the mission I'm supporting is not the primary spacecraft for this particular launch opportunity. And so what that means is that our schedule changes and we have no control over that. And so that's a challenge because the schedule keeps changing, but I'm not working on just that one mission. I'm working on 3 missions. And so when that one changes, it ripples over into the other things that I'm supporting. And so now 2 missions are maybe going to be launching within 3 weeks of each other. So all of the work leading up to those launches is now happening on the same schedule. So I'm having tests for both of these projects at the same time. I'm having reviews for both of these projects at the same time. And so trying to manage the expectations and manage the workload for those different projects is a challenge. And so I don't know if the question was like greatest challenge or greatest failure. Hopefully this isn't going to be a failure, but trying to keep everyone on the same page so that it doesn't become a failure, I guess is how I would want to phrase that, is really important. And so being upfront, being very clear with people about, well, you know, like I can't support this. Like a couple of weeks ago, 2 missions had 2 tests the exact same week, and I'm only one person, so I had to pick one. And so I had to talk with my management about it, and we had to figure out, well, what's the highest priority, and we had to work through all of that. So kind of, you know, like you balance your workload in high school, you balance your workload in college, and then you get out and get a job, and you still have to balance your workload when you go out and get a job. So I can think of a couple of other technical things. We realized after the fact that we'd made a mistake on one of the missions we were navigating to Mars. We weren't modeling something correctly. Fortunately, it wasn't something that, you know, resulted in crashing. But that was an eye-opener for us that yikes. We thought we knew exactly what we were doing, but we realized we made a mistake. And so on subsequent missions, we've tried to do things to not only catch that specific mistake, but catch that category of mistakes, if that makes sense. And so I think always trying to apply your lessons learned moving forward can also be a challenge sometimes too. Because you make the mistake and you learn from it, but applying that lesson forward so you don't make the same mistake again is what's really critical.
It's easy fight, the last battle. That's the one that you see, right? It's anticipating the next one. Engineers are good problem solvers. There are a lot of them. I like what Sarah Elizabeth said. There are a lot of smart people on this call tonight. I mean, their time is literally invaluable. It's like when Andrew works with the satellite or with a astronaut team, it's to the minute that they schedule their day. Their minutes are worth thousands of dollars. So trying to figure out how to put those smart people to work in the right direction and get them to work efficiently together is a big part of what you do. You can be the smartest kid in your cohort, but if you don't work well with people, you might be the only one that doesn't have a job. So Andrew, what is an astronaut's time worth these days by the minute, roughly speaking?
Yeah, you would ask me that. It's hard to quantify because what all are you adding in there? But you know, tens of thousands of dollars, and we schedule things in 5-minute chunks of time. And I'll tell you one of the most difficult challenges I faced is one I'm going through right now, and that is you know, NASA has a fairly stable chunk of money, but they're trying to ramp up these other programs, and the space station is not getting any easier to operate. And so they've kind of holistically been, hey guys, can you spend some less money? Spend some less money, and people don't really, higher level than me aren't really coming up with major cuts. So now they've turned around and said, no joke, next fiscal year, 20% cut on ISS. Now, I can move people into other positions, but you don't find 20% of your budget efficient, just changing the couch cushions, and we're not that inefficient. So there are some efficiencies, but then there's no joke work we have to stop doing. And it comes to, as Sarah Elizabeth was saying, talking about all the things on your plate and presenting the information of, okay, here are 4 or 5 options for things that we can stop doing. Here is the risk that you're accepting by us not doing that. And then you present it uphill, and people have to ultimately buy off on it. And one of my challenges now working in a medical environment is not only find me one engineer, but also find me one doctor who ever wanted less data, right? And so trying to tell them, hey, we're going to do less of this thing over here and less of that thing, and you're going to get less data from it. But I need to do that in order to spread my people around and to go feed the other programs and have less funding taken up by ISS. And it's an activity I have not encountered once in my time here, to do such a massive reduction in one area and a reshuffling of people. And it's tremendously challenging, and sometimes it wakes me up at 2 and 3 a.m., but this too shall pass, and we'll get to the end. And it's very rewarding to know that I'm making recommendations and people are accepting them, and to understand the responsibility that has been put on my plate, and to feel like I'm being a really good steward of the taxpayers and the government's money to make this transition and enable the next generation projects. So it's hard, and you have to manage a lot of people and a lot of feelings and a lot of emotions, but I am growing tremendously from it and really enjoying it.
That's why we have people like you guys running our space programs. So couldn't be in better hands. On that note, so the time value of intelligent people, I know we're past our 7:30 timeline tonight. We'll hang out, some of us. I've got some great staff on the call that put this together for us. So please thank Brian Murakami, Ryan Sieber. Meredith has been in the chat, Meredith Morris White. She shared her information. If you'd like to set up a visit or follow up with questions, feel free to do so. We've got some incredible students that spent their time, Caleb and Chrissa, and Simon and Brody and Aaron, all have a lot of great things going on, but they're sharing their great insights too. So we very much appreciate that. So if you need to hop off, you certainly can. A few of us will probably stay on if you do have lingering questions, but again, I want to thank Sarah Elizabeth and Andrew so much for your time, your support of the programs. We love to see all the incredible things that you do, and we can't thank you enough for your time and expertise tonight. So to everyone else, thank you for coming. I'll hang out for a bit, but thank you guys again for all joining us here tonight.
Thanks all. Rock Chalk.
Thanks all. Really enjoyed it. Rock Chalk Jayhawk.